Welcome to the George Washington University for the inaugural Sesno Series event. We now welcome President Granberg to the stage.
Well, good evening and welcome, everyone. Thank you all for joining us for the inaugural Frank Sesno Newsmaker Conversation Series. I am delighted to welcome you to this first event in a series that will critically examine the issues surrounding democracy, public understanding, and civil discourse at this important moment in our nation's history. This series exemplifies the core ethos of the George Washington University. Sitting just steps away from the heart of our nation's politics, GW is a community of diverse thinkers, activists, and leaders from across the political spectrum and around the globe. This is why our faculty, students, staff, and alumni come to GW to take on the world's most pressing challenges. As rancor and partisanship continue to divide our public discourse, the role of the university is more important than ever. It is our collective responsibility to model the vigorous pursuit of truth and engage in respectful disagreement. GW has always been a place for thoughtful conversations like the one we're going to have tonight, and we are committed to continuing that legacy. This new series has been made possible through the generosity of GW alumni Ted Siegel and Meredith Siegel, who created an endowed fund Ted and Meredith created an endowed fund that will ensure debate and dialogue about our democracy can endure. Ted is a 2003 graduate of SMPA and holds a bachelor's degree in political communications and currently serves on the National Council for Media and Public Affairs. Meredith is a 2005 graduate of the GW School of Business with a bachelor's degree in accountancy, and I just had a wonderful time with the Business Advisory Council earlier today. We are honored that GW is not only where Ted and Meredith met and where they earned their undergraduate degrees, but also where they have chosen to have an ongoing impact, supporting students and fostering critical conversations like this one tonight. The Siegel family are true leaders in our GW community. In addition to Ted and Meredith's generosity, Ted's brother Paul and his wife Jenna are also very engaged. Jenna is a 1998 graduate of the Elliott School of International Affairs and co-chair of the Elliott School Board of Advisors. She's also an active member of the IWE Executive Circle. Paul and Jenna last year created the Fund for Scholars Affected by the War in Ukraine. This fund supplies absolutely essential support that allows scholars impacted by the war to be able to continue their work. The whole Siegel family sees a need and then steps up to help to meet those needs. And we're so grateful to have you as a part of our GW community. Ted and Meredith, I really want to sincerely thank you. Thank you for honoring Frank Sesno in this way and for bringing this Sesno series to life. Because of your investment, our students will continue to have the opportunity to be part of these thought-provoking and engaging conversations around civility and democracy. And I can't think of anything more important for a university to be doing. So thank you so much. Now I want to talk a little bit about Frank Sesno. Frank Sesno's career includes a long list of memorable media roles. At CNN, he served as a White House correspondent, an anchor, a talk show host, and a Washington bureau chief. He has worked nearly his entire life for global news organizations covering war and famine, politics and policy, science, and climate change. He's covered presidents and prime ministers, advocates, and activists. Frank believes in the power of people to make change and the power of research to improve the human condition. He is deeply committed to the proposition that people need credible, factual, and verifiable information to fulfill their role as citizens. And I know I speak for all of us when I say how very proud we are to have Frank Sesno as part of the GW faculty. The School of Media and Public Communications here at the Columbian College of Arts and Sciences, I think, is the perfect place to have this conversation. It's the home of journalism and political communication, and SMPA is teaching students to be engaged, accountable, and tenacious in the pursuit of truth. These are essential qualities of the liberal arts experience and essential tools for our democracy. The GW faculty, students, staff, and alumni are among the most engaged people in the world, and we continue to further bold conversations that explore our world's biggest challenges. Tonight is another wonderful example of that. So thank you so much for joining us this evening, and it is now my pleasure to welcome Professor Frank Sesno to the stage.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, President Granberg, and thank you, Ted and Meredith Siegel, unbelievable, and thanks to all of you for coming tonight, and to those of you who are joining us via live stream, thanks for tuning in now or later, because this conversation is relevant now and later. I am incredibly honored, Ted and Meredith, by this gesture that you have made, and President Granberg, as you say, journalism, information, an engaged citizenry, informed decision-making based on fact, an ability to debate and differ in a civil way means the world to me and has been what I've built my career on, and it means the world to us because that is the world of the future and whether we succeed or fail. It matters to our students because this is what you study and you will do. And how many students are in the room? Would you raise your hands? Wow. Okay. That's what we want. And for those who are joining via live stream, if you didn't see that, I would say, what do you think, Ted? 80, 90% are students in the room. So this is a tremendous thing. What we're going to do in this series is we're going to engage red and blue, liberal and conservative, Democrats and Republicans, and people without labels, people inside the Beltway and outside the Beltway, people who do politics and people who are far from politics, to bring creative, bold thinkers for us to listen to and learn from, and who have a roadmap of sorts to share with us. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight with Senator Booker. Not just, we know what the problems are, and we can certainly talk about those. We need to understand them better. But what are the solutions, and what can you do, especially the students here? I like to talk about these events and think of these events as conversations with the future, because you are the future. You're going to own it, you're going to shape it, you're going to change it. And that's not hyperbole, because we already met an intern, a student who's already doing it in the senator's office. And once upon a time, the senator and I were students too, so we know something about this. We don't take the disagreement out of this in this series, because we disagree and debate. That's part of our culture too. But maybe we can figure out how to take some of the demonizing out of this process. And we will listen. We've lost the capacity to do that too much too, because our world is filled with noise and shouting. We will listen. We're joined, as I mentioned, and we're so honored by your presence in our inaugural series, our inaugural event of the series, here to be joined by Cory Booker, a Democratic senator from New Jersey. Been in the news a little bit, New Jersey. We might talk about that. Former mayor of Newark. One of 3 black senators in the U.S. Senate right now. There have been just 11 in more than 230 years. Former presidential candidate. Future presidential candidate. We may hear about that too. And someone who insists there is still a place for dialogue, discourse, compromise, bipartisanship, and hope. And we'll hear about that. He also thinks that our democracy, while frayed, is still worth the work, and it's a pretty resilient place. So I mentioned listening a moment ago, and that's what we're going to start by doing, to you, or to some of you. Because we sat down with a focus group of GW students a few weeks ago. We put 20 students together from 12 states, GW students, in our studio upstairs. Frank Luntz, who's heard of Frank Luntz, the famous Republican pollster, many of you, conducted the focus group. You'll hear in this conversation, and we're doing this deliberately because I want Senator Booker to hear this too, and we will respond to this. You'll hear the students discuss and debate a lot of things: the state of our democracy, free speech, the role of government, what should government do, and the capacity of our elected representatives to, well, represent us. Do you represent us? It's not an academic question. Frank Luntz started asking this group, and several of the group are here tonight, so we'll be hearing from them perhaps later as well. Give me a word or phrase to describe democracy in America right now. The answers? Inequity, flawed, injustice, fragile, polarized, breaking down, imperiled, divided, strained, bought. Let's watch.
I've never heard it this bad. And you're the generation that's supposed to be positive. What's gone wrong?
I mean, we grew up in such a volatile, hostile time. I went to high school in 2016, which was the Donald Trump-Hillary Clinton election. I've been in more courtrooms, more legislative hearings, more protests than I have been to high school football games or, university formals.
I would agree with that. Ever since I became aware of politics and things that are happening around my community, I've just noticed a lot of division, a lot of lack of awareness of issues happening on the ground, and not much work being done in order to address them.
And I think a lot of it has to do with what we've seen recently go on in the Capitol a few years ago, such as January 6th and the insurrection fomented by the leader of one of our political parties, and the reluctance of that party to move on from that leader who formed an insurrection to try to overthrow a constitutional act.
In terms of democracy, I am a Republican and I don't feel 100% fine saying what I feel in a lot of GW classes. I do believe that currently young people in this university don't accept as much different perspective of people that don't feel or don't think like the majority, and that's my personal point of view.
So let's talk about freedom of speech for 1 second. Do you feel like you can say anything to anyone at any time, as long as it's reasonable, as long as it's not hate-filled or dangerous?
I personally don't feel like we have genuine freedom of speech in a lot of circumstances, mostly because a lot of the things we say to other people, if they have a differing opinion than us, they always come back with us with not attacking our opinions, but attacking us as people.
Has anyone here said something in a political realm that caused you serious penalties? What was it?
So when I was in high school, I led an anti-racism campaign because my school district made national news because there was a Black student in middle school. He had a head carving, which was against dress code, and so the principal colored it in with a Sharpie as a disciplinary consequence. And because of that, we led an anti-racism campaign. I had a teacher kick me out of class, not allow me to take an exam.
What happened to you?
Just throughout high school, I would, speak strongly in favor of the Second Amendment and gun rights. And, a lot of people would punish me for that. A lot of people wouldn't want to be friends with me just because of my beliefs.
Would you stand up for his right to speak up and speak out about gun rights?
I support his right to speak about it. I mean, talking about whether or not it means we have to be friends with someone, I just know, that I don't want to be friends with someone who spent their days in high school classrooms where people have been killed because of the Second Amendment. As a journalism major, I kind of have to stand by the First Amendment and freedom of speech. I do believe everybody should have the right to be able to say what they think.
Is our political system working?
No.
Why not?
The two sides are so divided, and the fact that nobody can actually listen to each other, I think, is the biggest issue out of all of it.
The average member of Congress standing here right now, or senator, Do they understand what you're going through, or don't they have a clue?
Not clear.
Who says they understand? Raise your hands. Who says they don't have a clue? Raise your hands. Okay, why don't they have a clue?
Well, I think there's just the age divide. If you look at the average age of the United States Senate, most of them could possibly be our grandparents.
Why do elected officials not understand you?
I think they do understand. I think they benefit from keeping us polarized.
Can I ask a question on that? What issues do you think they use to divide us? Because I always hear people say, like, they distract us with small political issues to keep us from getting to the big stuff. But what are those small issues you think they're distracting us with?
I think any of the issues that come under the umbrella that is the culture wars.
So would you think that the trans rights debate is one of those issues that distracts us?
I think that issue is a very real issue, and I think all those issues are real issues. But yes, I think that in the media, it gets manipulated to turn us against each other and make us feel like our needs are not being met by the government.
Also, when you say that we need to protect our rights rather than having the government protect our rights, what do you think the role of government is then, if it's not to protect its citizens and their rights and their livelihoods?
Two things can be true simultaneously. I think the government has to protect our rights, but in terms of polarization, I'm not waiting for a senator to come save me. I'm waiting for people like you, honestly, who are friends with people on the right and the left.
Can I ask what power Ava has that, like, a senator doesn't? Like, why is Ava the one that's going to save you rather than the person that's voting on a bill?
Communities are going to save us. Ava is a part of a community now.
Right, but we hire, or we elect our elected officials on community, right?
Absolutely, but I don't know about you guys, but I like to take responsibility into my own hands. I think it's my personal civic responsibility as it is Ava's.
So were the three black people who were killed in Jacksonville, Florida, responsible for their deaths when a gunman went into Dollar General and shot them?
No.
So how is it? I'm just confused on how it's not the government's power to, represent us.
It is. But don't we have a role to play in that too?
Right, that role is voting. That role is
It's not just voting.
It's not. You're right. It's not just.
But if we're all complaining about government being divided and polarized, like we all said that at the beginning, like my word was strained. We all said it was divided, polarized, whatever. If we're all complaining about that, but we won't reach across the aisle and show bipartisanship with our fellow young people, how do we expect the government to do the same?
The problem here lies within the two-party system. I feel that when we as a nation do not educate ourselves to the level that we want bipartisanship and we want discussion, we instead resort to a conflict of me versus them, of red versus blue, of this side versus that side.
But I feel like the two-party system isn't the cause of polarization, it's just a symptom of it. It's not like if we didn't have these two parties to fall into, we would magically have more moderate beliefs.
Okay, I want to flip to the positive. Tell me what is great about American democracy and why it's working.
I mean, I would say what is great about American democracy is that we're able to do this right now. Like, we're able to talk about our different opinions, talk about the state of our country, and also just be able to speak and not have any fear of legal consequences.
It is a positive reflection on democracy itself that everyone has said something along the lines of democracy is flawed, we want to make it better.
But at the same time, democracy isn't about sitting here complaining about our issues. I don't go to GW and I don't sit in a room with people like you because I hate America. I love America, and I think loving this country means that, like you said, we sit here and throw out flaws. Yeah, we want to make it better.
Pretty thought-provoking stuff, and thanks to our focus group students who are here. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Senator Cory Booker.
That was impressive. That was so impressive.
So,
hello, everybody.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
I'm really psyched to be here. So
you were presiding over the Senate earlier.
I was.
You have a job.
I was the president. I tried in 2019, 2020 to become president.
Keep the government open?
And I kept it open.
For
single-handedly, I held the walls.
How about after the weekend?
I can't take responsibility for that.
Listening to that, listening to what the students discussed, debated, identified, what's your response? What struck you?
I was blown away by how sophisticated the arguments were. I was blown away by how deeply felt this were, how thoughtful they were. So I just, it's one of those times where I'm sitting and listening, and Nivriti, am I pronouncing it right? Yeah, I mean, she blew me away. Oh my gosh. Jacob, you lost your internship. Nivriti.
That didn't take long.
No, throw them under the bus. No, I'm joking, Jacob. You can come back
It's
tomorrow.
Washington. You know what we say about Washington, right?
What do we say?
It's not enough to succeed, your friends must fail. So
Yeah. No, I mean, look, the reality is, and I think Nivriti said it in a different way, but you cannot in this nation just be somebody who curses the darkness. You've got to figure out a way to be light, and it was nice to see that spirit among some of us.
But here's the question, Senator Booker, and it's a big one, I think. How do you instill trust and faith? And we're going to talk about that tonight. When the government isn't funded, when it's likely to shut down and people are watching this spectacle, when 70% of Republicans think the current president was not legitimately elected, when culture wars are raging, not just in the Congress, but in state houses and in towns and cities and school boards all across the country.
So, I've had a lot of unbelievable experiences as a United States Senator. I mean, you said there's been 11 United States Senators. I was actually the 4th black person ever popularly elected. Before me, it was some dude with a funny name. I miss Obama. I miss her husband too, but I miss Obama. So just picture this for a second. I'm a black guy, rarely have black people touch this floor of the Senate. And by the way, there are very few black staffers, there are very few minority staffers. It's been a very white institution for its history. And I just asked my staff as I was driving over to bring up the diversity statistics of even top staffers, and they're way smaller than even their jobs. So me coming into the Senate, I had staffers, people who work there break down in tears when they see me. And so it's not lost the power of walking on the Senate floor. But to get to your point, I want to just tell you about a moment I had. So it's the day of the State of the Union address this year. And it's really a magic, and I'm getting ready to go there because it's an aerobic experience too. I got to work out because it's all this sitting and standing up, so I got to prepare. I train for it, and so I get to the Senate to vote really quick. Then I'm going to hightail it back, grab something to eat, and then go to the Senate. So I go to the Senate floor, and it's majestic. It is our sacred civic space. It is extraordinary, the capital of the United States of America. And I come out, and I like to walk out through the east side, where there's some steps going down, and I love that because I walk out on these steps. I'm a little older than you. You may not know what I'm talking about, but this is a wonderful moment where I feel like Schoolhouse Rock, and I'm just a Bill, sitting on Capitol Hill. And I look over behind me. There's the dome of the Capitol. Before me is the Supreme Court. It is an amazing feeling. But my phone rings, and I pick up my phone, and I'm standing there in this unbelievable sacred space, and it is the stupidest question I've ever heard in my life on the phone. I can't imagine anybody answers no to this question. It's an obvious question. And I answer the phone, and it just goes, "Hello, this is the White House operator. Will you hold for the President of the United States?" I'm like, who says no to that? And so I'm blown away. I'm like, yes, I will hold. And here it is, Joe Biden. "Cory, how you doing?" I'm like, "Sir, you have a big speech in like 2 hours." And he goes, no, I want to read you a section of my speech. Now this, I'm now floored. The President of the United States wants me to, and he rehearses a section of his speech that happens to do with American policing, an issue that I have worked on for most of my career.
With Republicans.
With Republicans, with union leaders, police union leaders. And I'm standing there on the Capitol steps. The President of the United States is reading this speech. And then he asked me what I think. Now, you are all going to have this moment in your life if you haven't already. Somebody I say to my staff, "Does this jacket make me look fat?" And you've got to decide in that moment, are you going to tell them the truth? Or are you going to tell them just whatever they want to hear? And I figure the president called me a few hours before his speech. I'm going to tell him what I think. And I had some critiques and some thoughts.
So you said it stinks?
No. You can still candy coat it. He said, "Thank you very much." I said, "Thank you. hung up the phone. I'm blown away. I go into the home, this lineup, this amazing moment, American history. Remember, your Capitol, the wings of the Capitol weren't finished until the 1850s. The tradition now for this longer period of the Capitol is us to walk from the Senate chambers, straight line, under the dome of the Capitol, through where the House used to meet, little gold plaques on the ground where presidents like Lincoln and John Quincy Adams actually sat in the House of Representatives. Then you're in the chambers, shaking hands as you go in, you sit, everybody comes in. The aerobic exercise starts, I'm going up and down, and then the section on policing comes, and I'm blown away that I hear my input in his speech. I was the first person to stand in that volley. Amazing. Then I get home that night, and I'm lying in my bed in the Capitol, near the Capitol, and I get this, my phone lights up because it's a text message. And it's from a 917 number. I don't recognize it, and the person says, Senator Booker, this is John Meacham, one of the greatest historians in America, served in Republican administrations. Thank you so much for helping the President of the United States with his speech. It made more of a difference than you know. I was like, the first thought I had is, like, how do I print this out? I invited John Meacham to my office, and we talked about this moment in American history. And the thing he wanted me to understand is that there is nothing unprecedented that's going on right now. We are in a very precedented time. And we talked about history. I have degrees in history, but he was reminding me when FDR was elected, there was the Nazi Party was having rallies, Madison Square Garden full of Nazis, Americans. Right. He reminded me that the military leaders were saying we need to take over the government. You had a senator from Louisiana saying that I'm going to storm the Capitol with the people.
I recommend that everybody in this room read Meacham's Soul of America. It is a book that walks you through historically the crises that we've had, how deep and how bad it's gotten.
So how dare we?
But he says at the end of the book.
Yes, sir.
Okay? There is no guarantee that we will work our way out of this.
So that's
just because we've been through it and come through it before. So it may not be unprecedented, but it's bad, it's serious, it's perilous, and we better pay attention.
That's exactly the conversation we had. But how dare we as modern Americans, given all that we've overcome, as James Baldwin says, human history in general, American Negro history in particular, is a perpetual testimony to the achievement of the impossible. If your ancestors, if Americans before us, darker times, graver challenges, more wretched experiences of inequality and injustice, found a way every day to still bend the arc of the moral universe, who are we not to be optimistic in our prospects today?
So let's weave all of that. I'm going to bring you back here.
Okay, it's just hard.
It's okay. I want you to launch.
Sit down.
And by the way, a little later, we are actually going to come down and we're going to engage you in conversation. So
yes.
I have a few things to get through.
Okay.
My producer friends from CNN here, they've taught me on clocks and timing.
I think it's good. I'm a former
keeping people on point.
I'm a former tight end, though. Standing still is hard for me. I think some USC linebacker is going to come hit me. So
as long as they don't hit me.
Yeah.
But let's talk about trust and representation, because there's a test right now, a very close one to you. It's in your state. It's named Menendez. You were in a closed-door meeting today. He says he's not resigning. You have called on him to resign. You didn't in the past. He says he still has the trust of the people of New Jersey. Does he?
So you understand this is personal for me. I've spent a decade working with Bob Menendez. And we've been through hell, from our workplace literally being stormed to seeing the most awful tragedies in our own state, from shootings to natural disasters. And when you serve in the trenches with somebody, so many people here do play sports, and you sweat and bleed, you see their humanity. Nothing that Bob Menendez is being accused of in any way aligns with the person that I know personally. And so you're stuck in this situation where you love someone who is accused of heinous stuff. So I called on him to resign, which is one of the more gut-wrenching things I've done, because I don't think these offices are ours and we're entitled to them. I think that we have an office that is a privilege and that necessitates the public trust to do that.
Does he have the trust of the people of New Jersey?
I gave my opinion in my statement, which I said, I think it has been shaken.
Have you talked to him personally?
I've absolutely talked to him in person.
What did you tell him?
I told him what I believe. And again, reasonable minds can disagree on this. And I'm a black guy in America. I have a unique lived experience. And let me tell you, prosecutors get it wrong often. They accuse people of heinous stuff and don't get a conviction.
But you must not think they got it wrong this time. If you're
I
calling them
didn't
to
say
resign.
that. I think he has a right to prove his innocence in a court of law. He has a due process when it comes to the ethics allegations within the United States Senate.
Isn't this one of the things, though, when we look, it seems like politicians, or so many politicians, have no shame, right? This kind of thing goes on. Isn't that what shakes our...
You must not hang out with humans, because business people, I've seen scandals in business, I've seen scandals, God forbid, in academia. I mean, there's been no scandals in sports. So why should this shake? Why should every one of us in this room are mountain ranges? We all have peaks and we all have valleys. And especially the students here, let me tell you from experience, you're going to stumble in life. You're going to fall flat on your face. You're going to be crippled with shame for doing something. And so what I've said to my colleagues, you can hate the sin, but don't hate the sinner. We're not judged by how we treat the exultant on high, but whatever they do defines them, but we are judged, I think, most by how we treat people who are in the shadow, who have been condemned, who are being scorned. Bob Menendez has agency. He will choose his own way. I have said publicly what I believe he should do, but I will always, as a person who visits prisons regularly, tries to sit regularly with people in the shadows, in the corners, the ignored, the condemned, the despised, I will always believe a simple lesson from my faith, and I think it relates to patriotism, which is love thy neighbor. There's no exceptions to that. And patriotism is love of country, and you can't love your country if you don't love your fellow countrymen and women. And the conversation I just heard, I heard that sentiment. I don't have to like you, but I need to love you. Because people in this country now that think tolerance is the thing we should aspire for.
I mean, when you hear,
because I think tolerance is a repugnant state of mind.
When you hear a GW student say, "I'm a Republican and I feel, pressured or whatever when I speak up," and I hear that a lot, right? It's often conservatives who say, "I don't have freedom of speech on college campuses." What is your response to that? Are we too woke?
I have a lot of the usage of that word bothers me as a black person.
Because revise and amend.
No, because I just stay woke came from black people warning other black people to stay alert, because you could get killed if you look a white person in the eye on a sidewalk.
Yeah.
You could get killed driving your car in a neighborhood you shouldn't be in.
Taken on a life
I
of
understand
its
the
own.
new meaning of it, but I sometimes wish people would slow down before we throw slogans meant to incite and understand the origins of them. But the question beneath that, for me, was on a college campuses. Yeah, I am worried that when a conservative speaker comes onto a college campus in America, people try to stop even having an open forum to listen to them. I saw things on my campus at Stanford, the law school. I couldn't understand how you can treat someone who is trying to air their ideas. Now, that doesn't mean that you need to make somebody feel comfortable. If somebody says, "Oh, I feel pressure when I wake up," that's life, that's America.
And what one of our students said is that if we can't do this as students, how do we expect our senators and others to do it? What do you do on the Hill in terms of reaching across to people with deep differences to keep some sense of relationship going so that you can do business together? Who do you have lunch with? What advice do you have for us as to how we should do that in terms of what you do in your job?
I'm going to return to this theme over and over, and I'm going to give you a specific example on this one, but I'm going to return to this theme over and over. Do not be someone who expects the world to become more hopeful if you're not an agent of hope, more tolerant if you are not an example of tolerance. So for me, it's very simple. I ran a whole presidential campaign talking about the urgency that we love one another, and that the only challenge that I think America is truly threatened by is not external, it's the internal inability for us to honor each other, to respect our democratic traditions, and to create an environment in which we can find common ground. Now, I have to live that. Sounds really nice to say, and I have to start with the humble realization that I have views that probably reflect biases that I need to deal with. And so I had this challenge from my mentor, a guy I met when I was coming right out of college, 22 years old, in the Hart Building. First time I ever walked in was to meet a guy who became my mentor named Bill Bradley. And so when I'm coming down here, his advice, hey, Bill, what's your advice? Well, he had 3 pieces of advice, but the number one that I want to share with you now is that he said, go out and meet with every one of your Republican senators. Ask them to dinner, go to lunch with them. And I went on this incredible odyssey. And sometimes it was hard. It was hard to go to dinner with Ted Cruz. And no, not because I don't like him. He and I are friends. We've passed legislation together. But it was hard because he's from Texas and I'm a vegan. So choosing the restaurant was hard. But the dinner was great. I mean, people were literally stumbling by us, seeing us having dinner together. I invented this word, trademark, called stealthy, because people would take out their cameras and, take a picture of it. We were trending on Twitter beforehand. But the story I want to tell you is, I know I have biases. Every one of us has implicit biases. When I finally found an opportunity to meet with Jim Inhofe, a retired right-wing senator who has said things that I have found personally insulting on the Senate floor, and I know I have done things that personally insult him. I am a vegan. But I went to his office because I couldn't get a one-on-one, so I went to his office for Bible study. Now, I'm no evangelical.
But you're a person of faith.
I'm a deep, compelling faith that governs so much of my thought and belief. But going to sit down with evangelicals, there's nothing I can't. One of the things that bothers me most is religious hypocrisy. Like, there are about 380,000 or so churches in America. There are 550,000 homeless people. This is a religion that says, love thy neighbor, to stand up for if every church took 2 homeless people and helped them get back on their feet, there would be no more homelessness. So I do have some issues with my own faith. And so I go into his office, ready to try to figure out how can I forge some personal relationship with this guy, and immediately I am shaken by my own implicit bias because I see something on his mantle that I don't expect to see.
Which is?
A picture of him in an affectionate embrace with a little black girl. And so I call my older senators, the tradition in the Senate is everybody calls everybody their first names, but I was raised in a way that you respect elders and folk of high position. He's a chairman. So I look at him and I go, Mr. Chairman, sir, who dat? And he looks at me and he tells me this beautiful, moving story of his Christian family adopting a little girl out of a very, very bad situation. And I am moved. Fast forward months later, I'm now sitting in the back row in the Senate where all of us junior new senators do. We've got a little bit of a bald caucus now with Mark Kelly there, New Jersey guy too, by the way. And I see, I'm in a bad mood because there's a big education bill going through the Senate. It's been agreed upon, no amendments are going to be allowed. Mm-hmm. Lamar Alexander is the manager of the bill. No amendments, I've been told. And I have this amendment that I want to get on that would help homeless and foster children. It is righteous. It is good. I believe in it. But even my staff says, you're not getting this on. And I'm sitting there sulking in the back row of the United States Senate, and I see Jim Inhofe walk onto the Senate floor, into the well of the Senate. And I remember this beautiful story. And I walk into the well of the Senate, and I go, sir, summoning the spirit of this little girl, who's now a woman. And I say to him, sir, I know how much you care about disadvantaged children. And I made my case. And then he says something that usually means, in Senate speak, no, which is, let me think about it. And I go back to my seat, boom, in the back row of the Senate, sulking again. And then I look up, and this guy is making a beeline into the Democratic territory, comes up to me and he goes, I'm in. And he turns around and starts walking away. I'm confused. I'm like, excuse me, sir, what does that mean? And he smiles at me. He goes, Cory, I'm going to co-sponsor your amendment. I have him now. I go to Grassley. Explain to him, I got Inhofe on this. I get Grassley. I get another Republican. I go to Lamar Alexander on the floor of the Senate with a full house of Republicans. And I say, sir, I know you said no amendments on this bill, but 5 Republicans are co-sponsoring this. And he goes, sure, Cory. It's the law of the land now. That would have never happened if I did not get over myself, go to another colleague's inner sanctum, sit down with him and see his humanity.
It's a great story, and I think it really does show about the listening too,
Yeah.
right? We have to listen, we have to listen. We have to embrace our own implicit biases, overcome them, talk to people who are very different than us.
But you know what? There's a small subtlety that is important to point out.
Okay.
Because often the greatest sanction you get is not from the other group. It's when you step out of your own in-group.
Look at what's going on. You see that every day in
Yes.
your party and in the other party.
Oh my God.
We may shut down the government because of that.
Your worst sanctions are usually from your own group. And that's what we have to understand. I tell coalitions this all the time. If everybody in your coalition agrees with everything about everything, your coalition's not big enough.
Let me do this. So this is and we're trying to weave this conversation with
I
hope
make
and
it difficult
inspiration
because
and
I
good
give long
examples.
answers.
But I want, but I want to do this. There's some polling, and I want to see how this room compares to some polling. So you can keep track of this. You can estimate.
I'm going to
the
step out because
hands
these damn lights are so high.
for our viewing audience. Okay.
I can't see
so a
Jacob.
couple of questions. A couple of questions. Show of hands. How many of you think our political system is working very well or extremely well? Senator Booker, how many hands do you see?
No, I'm not. I'm joking. I did not put my hand up. Definitely not.
Okay.
And I see no other hands up.
Okay. In the last Pew poll, just 4% of Americans think that. Next question. How many of you trust the federal government?
Those are Hawaiians. They got it, you know.
How many of you trust the federal government all or most of the time? What percentage of hands do you see, Senator?
I would say that represents maybe 8%.
Okay, 16%. So we're actually doing pretty well with the government. 16% of the public now says they trust the government almost. How many of you dislike both, sorry, Senator, both political parties?
I'm taking names. Wow.
What percentage would you estimate?
I would say that's 40%.
Right. In the country, now remember, this is a sort of self-selecting crowd because they've come to Washington for a reason.
Yes.
Another question: How many of you students in particular, would like to go into some form of public service, government, public?
Wow.
What percentage do you see there?
Over 50.
Okay. So this is a remarkable group of people who actually do want to make a difference.
Yeah.
But a growing share, more than in 3 decades, of the public says they dislike both political parties.
What percentage is
28%.
Wow.
Okay. How many of you are hopeful when you think about government?
All right.
Wow.
That's really
What do
good.
you see? What's your estimate?
85.
Public, 10%. Just 10%
Wow.
say they are hopeful.
Wow.
So what can we do? What do you do? You've got your hope. You've got what you do. But how do you communicate that to a public that consumes? Okay, I have my buds here from cable television, and I worked in it for a long time. Lots of channels, lots of talk radio. Most of that is telling people what doesn't work, right? Why they shouldn't have hope. How do you re-inspire hope in the public? How do we re-inspire hope?
Well, I have an answer to go to, but I just want to, I love my host, but I want to just be very critical of the institution he used to work for, CNN. Because,
Just CNN?
No, but I'm going to. I mean,
come on, don't stop there.
I want to tell you that there is a supercharged effort to squelch the higher frequencies of humanity, because what keeps our eyes on screens, which is the corporate model of social media folks and cable TV, there's such a competition for your eyes right now. So I have a friend who's another handsome, bald black guy, and his name is Van Jones, and he used to be on a show called Ceasefire. And I love what Brene Brown says: it's hard to hate up close, so pull people in. And so when he sat down next to Newt Gingrich, they realized that they like each other. They disagree on a lot of things, but they realized they really liked hanging out. And when they started talking, they realized they agreed on more than they realized. So they go to the producers. Hey, we got a novel idea. Let's do the last segment, let's call it Ceasefire. And the producer said, yeah, go ahead, try it. So they got a few in, and then quickly they were stopped. Why? Because ratings were going down. I know this. What keeps your eyes on screens, we evolved in humanity of a bias towards that's what scares us, what outrages us.
Fear works.
Fear works. If it bleeds, it leads.
Do people stop you more on the street when you compromise and get something done, or when you're in some kind of a brawl?
Well, if there's a brawl going on, they stop me. Help me. I'm a big guy. I can help out in the brawl.
People look at car crashes. How many parents in the room, right? If your kid comes home with a report card, 4 A's, 1 D, what do you ask about first?
Yeah.
Right? That's our instinct, is what's gone wrong.
But I want us all to be more savvy consumers to know when you're being hit constantly, it doesn't give a fair understanding of the thousands of things we do in a bipartisan manner in the United States Senate. It takes away from, even in the last Congress, most Americans do not know the most productive bipartisan Congress of my lifetime.
Okay, this is a great point for us. I'm going to stop us here because I have another clip from the focus.
But I didn't get to tell why people should be hopeful.
We'll come to that,
okay,
I promise.
Good. Okay, good. Okay.
I'm very hopeful that you'll get to that. So we've talked a lot about exhaustion and dissatisfaction and all the rest, and Frank Luntz engaged the group with that. But he also asked them, what matters? I mean, there's a number out there, another polling number. 78% of the public think too little attention is spent on issues and too much attention is spent on what divides us. So let's step over there so people can see, and it's about a minute and a half. Take a look at this.
If you could say to your elected leaders, this is the issue that you have to address and fix right now. One issue. What's that issue?
I don't have one issue, I'm sorry, but I would say racial inequality and affordable housing, just because from time and time again, we see how people who are disenfranchised in marginalized communities, how they have a harder time getting opportunities.
I think it's immigration and border security. There are a lot of individuals that do want to come to this country. We need to make sure that they follow the rules and the regulations.
The one issue.
And also abortion, I think. Why are we going back 30 years?
I think that when you look at polling, the American government misrepresents people on a lot of issues, and I think that's because of corruption. I think that's because of things like unregulated campaign finance laws and money in politics or congressional stock trading.
The one issue.
Inflation and standards of living.
I believe education is the basis of everything, the foundation, and I believe the U.S. needs to make people less intolerant.
The one issue.
Voting rights. If we can't fix voting rights, we can't fix the economy, we can't fix racial justice issues, we can't fix climate issues, we can't fix social issues like LGBTQ rights, abortion rights, healthcare in general.
See why I like working at this place? Pretty great list. What's your one issue?
I mean, it's like asking me what my top organ is. I can't function without my kidneys. I also can't function without my heart. And to think you can peel away one of these issues, I think everything they said up there is interrelated to the whole. And so I get excited sometimes when people are so moved by an issue, they find themselves engaging in ways they have never engaged before. That's often how things shift. And the best example of that is a very young person. I think young people are at the center of every great movement for social change, social justice, and advancement in our country. Young people have been at the center of them. And one of my favorite young people was this extraordinary innovator doing hunger strikes before Gandhi. It was a woman from New Jersey, very young woman named Alice Paul, who was dissatisfied with the establishment suffrage organizations and her creativity. She was an artist of activism, and she came to be the first person in American history to lead a protest in front of the White House. But people were so upset with her for doing that, she was protesting a wartime president.
Yeah.
And so they trumped up charges on her that she was blocking a public way. She wasn't. The protesters of her were blocking it, and they put her in jail. She goes on hunger strikes, and they take tubes and stuff them down her throat to force feed her. Then what do you do with a powerful, strong, brilliant woman? They declared her insane and put her in an insane asylum. And if it wasn't for a journalist, thank God for the First Amendment, who broke the story, public sentiment shifted when they saw she was being tortured. And she got out, and Wilson flipped and became a supporter of suffrage. It is a great testimony to the fact that we didn't get women's voting rights in America because a bunch of senators on the Senate floor got together and said, fellas, let's huddle up here. Let's give those women the right to vote. Ready? Break. We didn't get voting rights in 1965 because Strom Thurmond came to the Senate floor and said, I've seen the light. Let those Negro people have some rights. No, all of those things happened because movements that young people were at the center of.
That's exactly right.
Demanded the change on the issue. Hundreds of gun laws have changed in America of recent. Hundreds have. I can name you gun laws that have changed in some states that have saved lives because of youth-led movements.
Look, I want you to tell these stories, but when I was in high school and a young person in college, mostly high school, we had a thing called the Vietnam War. And it was young people who protested, who did moratorium days, who
Yes.
showed up in, sorry, President Granberg, occupied administration buildings
Yes.
and did outrageous things. But they put the issue front and center. Same thing with civil rights, joined by across generations, obviously, but
Yes.
young people, as we know,
Right.
and some paid with their lives,
Yes.
led the way on that. And that is the power that you have. And now, because of social media and everything else, you have more power than any generation ever in human history.
What Fred Shuttlesworth, Ella Baker, James Meredith would have done if they had the tools of today's organizers, it's extraordinary.
I want to take you down, and I want to engage the audience in a minute and open this conversation, but there are a couple things quickly I want to ask you about. One is our electoral politics right now. A little lightning round on this?
Yeah, sure.
Joe Biden too old?
No. No.
Is he too old to be reelected?
Let me just tell you, let me just give you my take on age, not on him.
Quickly.
I'm in a black church, and the pastor at the end, I'm campaigning in North Carolina, or Atlanta, and the pastor says, yeah, it's birthday, stand up. And this person stands up, and I'm thinking they're like 80, 90, they're like 55 years old. And I'm like, wow, you are old. And then this person stands up and says, oh, look who we got here. It's her 92nd birthday. And I stand up and I say, the devil is a liar. She's not 92 years old. She's 55 years old because she looks so phenomenal. When has a simple number been a definition?
You can read the polls. You can listen to people on the streets.
I work with this guy.
You may work with. How many
see
people
him.
in the room are enthusiastic Joe Biden supporters? Okay, a few hands, but not a lot.
I understand the reality of electoral politics. Handsome, beautiful people of certain types can inspire. I'm sorry. I'm looking at productivity. Judge me by the work that I have done. And he is the most successful president. Forgive me, Clinton. Forgive me, Obama. He is the most successful president of the modern era.
Do you think there's any way Republican challengers can stop Donald Trump getting the nomination?
Oh, wow. I mean, I'm friends with some people that are running in the Republican primary, and I'm stunned that they're not catching more traction.
Who do you think is the strongest candidate?
I mean, my staff will hate me for answering this because they want my answer to be, I don't know. I won't commentate on the Republican. I'm focusing on the work of the United States Senate.
You. Go ahead.
Look, I think that Chris Christie is a political talent. It's a shame that he's being characterized as the anti-Trump guy. He and I disagree on a lot, but he's a friend, but he's an incredible, raw political talent.
What about Nikki Haley?
I don't know Nikki Haley as well. I know another person from South Carolina a lot better, Tim Scott. And I think that if the real Tim Scott that I've gotten to know, the soulful man who leads with his heart and has a brilliant head, I think if he gets a chance to show himself, he's got a lot of possibility.
You going to run for president again?
It's likely. Yeah, but I don't know. Look, obviously there's a whole, this is the best field of talent I have seen on the Democratic bench in my lifetime. I mean, maybe it's because I know a lot of these people, but I can't tell you what I'm going to do in 2028. I had a reason to run the last time, and that's why I ran. If that reason is still there, then I will run again. But I see a lot of rising stars. I am looking not just for someone who can lead and manage the federal government, get difficult issues. I want someone who can inspire us to understand that the lines that divide us are nowhere near as strong as the ties that bind us. I want someone to inspire our nation again to believe that we belong to each other, that we have a calling to create a more beloved community in this nation, and that at the end of the day, we, in this generation, the greatest, most important calling that we have is to put more indivisible back into this one nation under God. And I think when we come together, when we bring hidden figures together with white male astronauts, we can defy gravity and achieve new heights.
Why doesn't this message of hope and these things that we can do that we all find so inspiring, whatever party they come from, to hear people talk like this, why don't we hear more of this from elected officials?
Well,
why does all the bitterness and people feel alienated in this country now?
Look,
people feel tuned out in this country now.
Right.
Why can't you sell this?
I've had this conversation with Frank Luntz before. I think he said something joking to me like, your message was 3 years too early, because Americans now more and more are tired of extremes. They're looking for people that can bring people together and get things done. When I was running for a town hall stage in Iowa, it's one of my funniest moments for my campaign. I'm storming the stage, former tight end from Stanford. Dude, big guy at the bottom of the stage who looks like an Iowa linebacker. And he looks at me and just gets like, dude, I want you to punch Donald Trump in the face. And I look at him and I go, dude, that's a felony. And I jump up on the stage. I sort of ask him if I can have permission to tease him. And I just remind us of our history. King, Bevel, Cotton, they didn't bring bigger dogs and bigger fire hoses to go against Bull Connor. What their genius was, and I don't even know if they made Bull Connor decide to love black people. I'm sure actually they didn't. They didn't. But what they did was the most powerful thing I think great leaders have done, which is they changed the frequency in our nation and inspired the millions of Americans that are sitting on the sidelines to get engaged in the cause of our country. That's what leadership is. It's not about follow me, it's about inspiring people to understand that they must lead. Now more than ever, the biggest problem in America, King said it in his generation, it applies to our generation. Everybody wants to talk about the violent or vitriolic words, how bad things are. No, King said what we have to repent for, it's not simply the vitriolic words and violent actions of the bad people, it's the appalling silence and inaction of the good people. And so this gets me to the definition of hope, and then we can jump into the audience, but I'm a kid from the suburbs. I'm the son of 2 IBM parents that met here in Washington, D.C. In fact, I'm the only of the 100 senators who was actually born here in the Capitol. And my parents, graduates of 2 HBCUs, my father from real dirt, poverty, single mother, couldn't take care of him, but they found their opportunity in this country, graduated from college, landed in this incredible city at a time that activists were putting pressure on companies to hire qualified blacks. Suddenly my dad's the first African-American hired by IBM in the Virginia, Maryland, DC area as a salesman. And of course, you give qualified people a chance, they crush it. He's suddenly one of their top 5% of global salespeople. We move to New Jersey, and we move into a wealthy white town. But we couldn't get into the town. We had to get a white couple to pose as us in 1969, because they kept denying my parents opportunities.
What do you mean a white couple posed as you?
There were groups of Americans in the 1960s that said segregation isn't just a Southern thing, it's profoundly all over this country. In the North, they called it real estate steering. And so when my parents would show up to look at a house, they would be lied to and told it was sold. They would be told, oh, this is pulled off the market. So my parents didn't know what to do. In the places with some of the highest ranking public schools, they were told there were no housing available. And they found a group of people that met in a living room, black and white, Christian and Jewish, and they were determined to help my parents. So they put a white couple behind them, so when my parents were told the house was sold, the white couple would show up and find out the house was still for sale. On the house that my parents fell in love with, they were told it was sold. The white couple put a bid on the house because it was still for sale. Bid was accepted, papers were drawn up. On the day of the closing, the white couple didn't show up. My dad did, and a lawyer named Marty Friedman. and they confronted the real estate agent. Now, this should be the end of the story, but it's not. The real estate agent stands up, punches Marty Friedman in the face, sigs his Doberman Pinscher on my dad, and an awful fight breaks out. And my father and Marty get out, thankfully, not that scathed. The legal rigmarole goes back and forth, and they agree to sell the family to my parents.
Sell the house to you.
Sell the house to the family decides to sell the house to my parents. And we move in, as my father calls us, the 4 raisins in a tub of sweet vanilla ice cream. And my father is like watching his son have privileges that would blow the mind of any of my ancestors. And I go off to Stanford to get my undergraduate master's. Rhodes Scholar, Yale. My dad looks at me and goes, boy, you got more degrees in the month of July, but you ain't hot. Life ain't about the degrees you get, it's about the service you give. So when I was your age, and my mom saw me not knowing what I want to do with my life, my mom's like patient with me. She goes, well, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? That question now sits on my desk as a senator. She goes, I want you to imagine the greatest, what would you do if you, and I knew exactly what it was.
That question is in my book.
Wow.
It is a great question that you should all ask yourselves.
And my hero was a guy named Jeffrey Canada, who moved into one of the toughest neighborhoods in Harlem and just began a nonprofit serving the people. I did that in Newark. I still live in that same neighborhood. I'm the only United States senator that lives in a neighborhood last 25 years below the poverty line, black and brown community. And I thought I knew what hope was before I moved to Newark, but I didn't. Because living in a community where the children, the boys that used to hang out in my lobby, most of them are dead now. Where I have seen things that literally have left me traumatized, and no one seems like they give a damn. One of the moments was when I tried to stop a kid from bleeding to death, a teenager. And you want to talk about terror? I'm screaming for people to call the ambulance, putting my hands in this kid's bloody chest. Foam, blood starts pouring from his mouth. I don't know anything, but he's got to breathe. He stopped breathing. I'm just sticking my fingers in his mouth, trying to clear a passageway for him to breathe. The police director, who wasn't an ally of mine, he was the guy I eventually replaced as mayor, he still says to me this day, when I finally got to the scene, you were shaking. I have no memory of how I got back to where I live, but I was living in public housing projects on the top floor. But one of the most salient memories, which I'll never forget, is scrubbing another boy's blood off my hand as I stood staring at the sink. And looked at myself in the mirror, and that was the moment that everything in me broke. And I was so angry at this country like I had never felt before. A darkness entered my soul at that moment. And I was so angry about millions of Americans who put their hands on their hearts, and you swear an oath that there will be liberty and justice for all, but nobody seems to give a damn about what happens in communities like mine. Everybody goes off like life like normal when children are dying daily. And the person who taught me about hope that snapped me out of it was the tenant president, because the next morning I come down in the elevators, I'm drowning, I am choking on the silt and the charred remains of my hope. And as I walk through this lobby of my building, I have a faint memory that this is actually the lobby in the 80s when I was living in the suburbs of New Jersey, not aware of what was going on just miles from where I live, that Miss Jones's, the tenant president's son, was murdered. Now that's a pain I can't even imagine. This is a 19-year-old, 18-year-old I didn't even know. But Miss Jones had her son killed. And she and I were the two of the few people in that building that could have lived in other places. And I come out of the lobby and into the courtyard between the two project buildings, and her back was turned to me, but there she was, as if God placed her there for me. And I stopped in my tracks, and I just wanted to scream, but I couldn't find voice. And she turns around and she sees me. And the only thing I needed in that moment was exactly what she did, is she just opened her arms for me to come to her. And I ran to this woman, like a little kid to his mother. She's 5 feet tall, I'm 6'3", but I felt like I disappeared with her arms, and she squeezed me, and that's when I cried first. I cried tears of hurt and rage and anger. And she held me and she said two words over and over again that I will never forget. And I still lean on these two words. And they have nothing to do with religion, but everything to do with how other people before us got over wretchedness and hate and pain and hurt when they wanted to give up. And all she said, two words over and over, is stay faithful, stay faithful, stay faithful. You know what hope is? Hope is not a feeling. It's not a sentiment. Hope is a choice. It is staring the ugliness and the pain and the hurt and still deciding that I'm not giving into it. Hope is the active conviction that despair will never have the last word. And so I hear cynicism, and it frustrates me, because cynicism is a refuge for cowards. You want to be cynical about America? How dare you? Miss Jones wasn't cynical when her son was murdered. Harriet Tubman wasn't cynical when they beat her within an inch of her life. Alice Paul wasn't cynical when they were shoving tubes down her throat and beating her in a prison. These were patriots. So who are we, America, today? Have we lost our grit and our guts? Or are we going to stand up and look at all that's wrong with our country, not flinch from it, not hesitate to name it, but to say, I see you, and I'm going to answer the darkness, because I'm going to burn so brightly that, like my ancestors, I'm going to find a way forward.
That's right. I mean, we need to understand our history. We need to understand there has always been fight and people have always fought. And I want to thank you for sharing that so powerfully and so personally. Why don't we walk down here and spend a few minutes with the audience? This has been an astonishing conversation. There's so much more I want to talk to you about. But I'd like for you to talk to the senator. We can perch on the edge of the stage here. Is that okay? Can we do this? That kind of.
I saw over here somewhere a person who is probably more brilliant and beautiful than them all, who has on his he has a presidential pin for a candidate
Cory
that ran for president.
2020.
Yes, yes. I need to get a Sharpie.
I was asking when you were going to run again, not when you had run.
Thank you. Oh, hug.
So the point here is to have a conversation for a few minutes, and we'd all like more. I think we could go on all night with you, Senator. But, well, we've got a couple of microphones, and I'd like to invite some questions or a comment. I would ask you to keep it short so we can get to as much as we possibly can.
Unless your name is Siegel. I mean, you kind of paid for the evening, right?
And then some.
Not Seagull with a U, because that's foul.
All right. So
but Seagull.
Let's start right here.
Did you get that? The bird?
Hang on to the mic, Jack, please. Jack.
These dad jokes don't come easy.
Could you stand up, please, and come on over? Jack will hang on the mic. Come on out into the aisle so we can all see you.
Jack, you have such beautiful locks, but have you ever thought of shaving them to help guys like me not feel inadequate?
Introduce yourself, tell us what you're studying, if you're studying, and go ahead and ask your question.
Absolutely. Thank you, Senator Booker. My name is Solomon Kane Smith.
I'm sorry, that's Jack.
That's Jack.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Your name is what?
Solomon Kane Smith Shomade.
Can I just call you Solomon?
No, I go by the whole first
I got to say Solomon Kane.
Solomon Kane.
Solomon Kane.
Great student.
Yes.
Okay.
Writes for the
That's
Hatchet,
your first
among other
name.
things.
Yes.
Solomon Kane.
Solomon Kane.
Okay, beautiful name.
Thank you. I'm a sophomore studying journalism and mass comm.
You're only a sophomore? You have this air of maturity about you, sir.
But thank you for coming, like I said. I just wanted to ask you, what do you see, or what would you like to see in the next 5 to 10 years, the political climate of this country we live in? And, yeah, what do you say?
I guess I want to see us get away from the sort of the extremes that are anti-democratic and authoritarian. I just think that when I travel the world, people are worried about America because they lean on us, not for our perfection. I mean, I visit some nations and they're quick to point out all the mistakes we've made in the past, but they do understand that we are, in many ways, an indispensable nation for the future. I think the extremes are undermining our ability to find common ground. So that's one thing I want. And the other thing is I want to reignite the sense that we don't resign ourselves to things. One of the best experiences I've had as a United States Senator was when Warnock and Ossoff won in Georgia. It did a different calculation for me in what we could do. So I call up with two great senators, Senator Bennett, Senator Brown. We were waiting to pounce on the President's Chief of Staff to say, please include this policy in your agenda. And they did. They adopted it and truly wrapped their arms around it. And it was called, the policy is the expansion of the child tax credit. Now this sounds so wonky, but it's actually was the biggest middle-class tax cut in the history of America, that about 80+%, between 80 and 90% of American families got more of their tax money back. But what it also did, and for struggling families, not below the poverty line, just trying to figure out ends to meet, it gave them thousands of dollars back if they had multiple children. But it also cut child poverty in half. So I know my parents' generation, not pointing to you, you're not my parents' generation, I'm telling you, over there, like not you at all.
That was a close one.
My parents' generation, they were crazy enough to believe that we could have a day without prisons, with a time without poverty. We seem to have resigned ourselves. But the great thing about the child tax credit is when we did it last year, it cut American poverty in half.
And it's gone.
And now it's gone. And what happened to child poverty is it went back up. But it was brilliant in the sense of, and I said this at a press conference, that no one could ever say again that poverty is some moral condition, that poverty is inevitable. We now know unequivocally that the highest rates of child poverty in the developed world, which is here in the United States, is a policy choice. And we have made a choice. The $20 billion a year we give to extractive oil and coal industries is more important than the child tax rate. We've made a choice. that the carried interest, which goes to the wealthiest in our country, is more important than the child tax. We've made a choice. These are choices that we make. And so I want in our politics to understand that we can be bold again, but do it in a way, look at the math. Where should we invest as a society? And I think the greatest societies have always, going back millennium, have been the ones that put their children's well-being first. And if we do that, I'm telling you, the greatest natural resource any country has in a global knowledge-based environment is the genius of our children. And in America, genius is equally distributed. As many geniuses are being born in the lowest income areas as in the highest income areas. We just have to get better at cultivating it. And so I want us to be a child-centered focus with a bold dreams about the possibilities for our kids.
Let's try to get some other questions. Where's the other mic? Where's Sarah with the mic? Sarah, why don't we come to this person right here? Yeah, you come to the middle. And then next, let's get this gentleman all the way in the back. Why don't you come to the middle?
Finally, you go to somebody on the right. I mean, this has been very biased.
I have to be very
towards
careful
the moderate,
about that.
so it's the middle.
All right. How about over here? Let's do woman over on the end. Why don't you come around and let's see if we can. Yeah, and I'll come back to some more if we
focus
can.
group member here come?
We'll get the focus group, but
Okay. So you're like, she had her time.
I want
Cory.
you to be a producer at CNN. All right. Go ahead. Let's see if we can make
quickly,
it lightning
I'm going to try to go.
Yeah, hopefully my question won't take too long. I'm Jenna. I am a journalism student. I'm a freshman. And I was just wondering, since I'm studying journalism, what do you hope to see in like the next generation of journalists covering politics to kind of acknowledge their role in the divide that we're seeing right now?
Two quick things I'm going to try to do on our speed round. One is, my hope for the future of journalism is that we save journalism, because what's happening in this country to newspapers and journalists. So when I was in City Hall in Newark, I had like 6 to 8 reporters covering me all the time from different outlets. Now there's like barely a full-time reporter covering. We're losing the most important part of our democracy, which is, I think on the Coliseum, I will butcher the Latin like quis custodium, something like that, who will watch the watchers. That's the first hope, is somehow we figure out a business model that it can revive American journalism. And then the second thing is, I hope we begin to find sources that their business model is about getting trust. I really think
as opposed to?
I think that we have now people whose business model is telling us what we want to hear and riling us up. And literally, there was a news station that when the child tax credit ended and poverty went up, they're like, Joe Biden has increased poverty 50%. And with no reason or explanation of why poverty was down and why did it really go up, is because we couldn't get one more vote in the Senate to save the child tax credit. So that's not the truth. And I'm really frustrated that people are getting shadings of the truth. I don't want to create a false equivalency. It goes on both sides, but I definitely am seeing it far more on the extreme right.
Thank you. Next question.
Hi, Senator Booker. My name is Ethan. I'm a junior here at GW. I'm very proudly from Voorhees, New Jersey.
What?
Yep.
He's a voter. I got to hug him. All right, Jersey boy. Go ahead.
I'm also
now with the zinger question.
Yeah, you're getting me a hard one.
I'm also a very proud intern at the House of Representatives. And
for who?
For Congressman Donald Norcross.
Yes,
New Jersey 1.
Yes.
Go ahead with your question.
My question for you is, what advice do you have for those of us who are about to start our journeys in life after we graduate here at GW?
Wow.
It's going to be a short answer.
Yeah,
right?
I'll give one piece of advice. I just want you to be as radical in your highest virtues as possible. And the quick story example, I'll give you this, because I preach about love and kindness all the time. I'm going through a McDonald's drive-through. I still think McDonald's French fries are vegan at this point. They're actually not. They saturate them in like beef sauce. So I don't go. The Burger Kings are vegan. And I'm going through. Now I'm in the car. I have a driver in New Jersey, retired Newark detective, grew up in the project, served in the military, came back to the police department. Amazing guy. We've been in a car for like 15 years together, more than that, almost 20 years. And we don't have to talk. When I'm busy working, I can just look in the rearview mirror. He knows what I'm thinking. So I get my McDonald's French fries, get 2 of them. I'm holding them like they're like, my precious, my precious. All I want to do is get home, unbuckle my belt, and sit and watch bad TV, British Bake Off or something like that. And so we're about to drive out, and then I see a guy in a dumpster rooting around. And I don't have to talk to Kevin. I look at him, rearview mirror, he knows I'm going to stop. I roll down the window. Hey, man, what's up? And he sort of waves me off. And I realized the tone of my voice didn't respect his dignity enough. And I go, excuse me, sir, do you need anything? And he turns around and he goes, I'm really hungry. Now, I don't know religion you all, if at all, but my faith says something like, if you have 2 McDonald's French fries and your neighbor has no McDonald's French fries, I think it's like the Sermon on the McMount. And so I hand him my fries. Reflexively, it's who I am. My hands shake a little bit. I really don't want to give them away, but it's my religion. And I give them. And he's happy. I'm happy. And then he looks at me and he goes, okay, thank you, sir. Do you have any socks? Now, any of us who've worked with people experiencing homelessness, that's really important. And I don't carry extra socks in my car, so I vainly look around and I go, I'm sorry, I don't. And he steps away, he's happy, he's got some great French fries. I turn and look at Kevin in the rearview mirror. All I'm saying to him, I'm not saying any words, I'm looking at him and saying, there's nothing better than McDonald's French fries, there's nothing worse than McDonald's cold French fries, get me home. And he doesn't move. And I'm like, insubordination. And I look at him again, and he doesn't move. He puts the car in park, reaches between the steering wheel and his legs, kicks off his shoes, takes off the socks that he's wearing, and hands them to the guy who looks like he just received the most valuable gift possible. I'm talking about all these high values. This guy's living them in a radical way. And so my advice to you is forget all the career and all that kind of stuff. I just want you to be one of those radical people in your life that takes off your socks.
All right, go ahead. You know, we got a little thing.
Yeah, let's just go.
It's great.
Let's go.
Thank you, Senator. I'm Antoine.
I'm sorry, Anne?
Anne.
Is it
Antoine.
2 names?
First name, last name.
Good.
Yeah,
Anne.
I'm Anne.
Okay, shoot, Anne. Are you from Voorhees?
The what?
Are you from Voorhees, New Jersey?
No, I'm not. I'm from Seattle, Washington.
Oh.
But I'm also a first-year journalism major.
Okay.
And I just wanted to thank you for coming out and speaking with us today.
It's so good to be here.
I also love McDonald's fries.
Okay.
But
I don't love them anymore. They're not vegan.
My question for you is, I thought it was inspiring how you said that to have hope, we must embody hope. And to expect tolerance, we must embody tolerance. What do you think you and the Democratic Party have still yet to do to become that vision of hope?
Yeah, I love when people say you and the Democratic Party. What is the Democratic Party? I mean, there's the Democratic Governors Association, there's the Democratic Congressional Association.
There's you and your colleagues in the United States Senate.
In the United States
Start
Senate.
there,
okay.
all right? I mean, you know.
I don't always agree with the Democratic Party. I literally have political lashes on my back for taking stands that...
Okay, so what do you think your party needs to do what she asks you to do?
No, what do you think I should do and my party? Can I just speak for myself?
Can he just speak for himself, or do you want to hear about the party?
Oh,
she's a journalist.
Okay.
She's going to stand her ground.
I think our party can do a lot more to try to do bipartisan bills when they're possible. And the best example I'm hoping for right now, because it's screamingly important, is that we do a bipartisan immigration reform bill.
I mean, there is a real humanitarian crisis on our borders.
Yeah, my party's
that is overwhelming cities and states all over the country.
And my party's going to step up and say we can't create these attractive nuisances, as they say in law, where we create these environments where it's easy to get through, but people die.
But you also have the politics of this, because if your party doesn't acknowledge the crisis that immigration poses
Yes.
on both sides of the coin,
Yes.
right, you look clueless.
Yes. Yes, and there may have been Democrats in the past that have looked pretty clueless.
Would you be one of those?
I have never
been clueless.
Never said that I've never been clueless.
All right, we had another question over here from somebody from our focus group. Anybody from the focus group? Go ahead. Mariana, why don't you come over here where the mic will come to you. And be brief, please.
Hi, Senator Booker. My name is Mariana Pecora. I am a second-year political communications student. I'm also the communications director of the Gen Z-led youth political engagement group, Voters of Tomorrow.
And where in New Jersey are you from?
I am from San Diego, California.
The Western New Jersey.
But I think that there's been a really inspiring thing happening in our politics right now, where specifically Gen Z, you're in a room full of us right now, have been turning out and voting in record numbers 2018, 2020, 2022. Yet time and time again, we've been taken advantage of by campaigns or considered to be sort of like second-class voters.
Really?
Sort of, yeah.
Taking advantage?
Okay, what's your question?
I want to debate this issue. Go ahead.
Yeah,
What's your question?
Most young people have never been reached out to by a campaign. I've worked for campaigns. I've never been reached out to by a campaign. So what can the responsibility of people that are running for elected office look like to make sure that they're not taking young votes for granted and to make sure that they're really serving the young people that are going to be dealing with the consequences of the actions of our politicians?
Right.
Okay, first of all, I run campaigns, we run them on like young people. I ran for president, my campaign was powered by young people. That's what sort of shocks me. We were reaching out to young people all over the place. The best solution I have to this, and the thing I beg everybody here, is don't wait, run for office and solve the problem. Your generation, I was the youngest person elected ever in my city's history when I became a city councilman person in New York, and people told me I was too young. And then I ran one, and I was one of the younger people ever to run for mayor. Run for office. I cannot tell you how important it is. Run for school board. Run for city
Anybody in
council.
the room considering running for office?
Please raise a lot of hands, please. Awesome. Just don't run against me.
I want to ask you one last question here, and then maybe we'll have time for one more. This is an important one, and this comes close to home, and I'm doing this on behalf of us here at this university, of the country, I think, and a colleague who works in this space. And it really can revolve in some ways around the trust we have or don't have in our institutions and around free speech. Under the banner of free speech, there are investigations now into researchers who are looking into mis and disinformation.
Yes, I just
who
heard a
are
podcast.
trying to figure out what the responsibility is, how the algorithms work of social media platforms in peddling mis and disinformation. And Jim Jordan, and I'm not making this as a partisan statement, it's just a reality, but Jim Jordan has subpoenaed documents and emails and others of certain people who are trying to research this. What conservatives say is that their free speech is being affected, impinged, damaged by social media platforms and others who are trying to shut them down. What others say is, no, this is about shutting down mis and disinformation, and if it's coming disproportionately from your side, so be it. What role do you have in this conversation? I know this is over on the House side right now. And what do you say to the researchers who are working on this, who are really concerned about the harassment and some of the things that may be coming at them and others in this field? So this is what we do at a university, right? We research and we're seeking information, and it's not a popularity contest. It's trying to figure out what is going on.
Right, and universities, the whole idea of tenure, this was a place to be a safe environment for investigation, for research, for innovation, for dialogue. And it is so offensive to me that people are using their congressional positions to try to harass or undermine or stop just getting to the facts. And so my role, I'm on the Judiciary Committee. We have had these kind of dialogues and debates about social media platforms, about algorithms, and I've sit on my side of the aisle as a lot of my colleagues have gone off about this idea that conservative ideas are being squeezed over there. So I'm frustrated about it. I'd be willing to hear more and do what I can to help you fight back against this.
Okay, we might like to have that conversation.
Yeah, I would like that.
It's very important. All right, we're going to do one more question.
Let's do two more and then
two
stop.
more?
Two more.
Okay, why don't you pick them from the room, one from each side?
I want to go from the right and from the left because I am a bipartisan person. And you're voting for her. You're sacrificing your own hand up for her, so you represent the right.
Okay, so why don't you come to the middle? Why don't you pick on the left here so we can get the two people standing side by side?
I've been so blown away by my friend that was sitting behind me. So from the
Nivriti, why don't you come over here and stand and prepare, and please introduce yourself and fire away. And
Hi, I'm Dre Petamonte. I am
Draben?
Dre Petamonte. Dre like
Dre
the doctor.
Petamonte.
Yes.
Okay. Dre is such an awesome name. Is that actually the name on your birth certificate? G-R-E-Y?
Unfortunately not. It is Andrea Mireya Pedemonte, but I like to go by Dre.
All right.
And Dre, I mean, in sort of full disclosure, you want to say anything about?
Dre, are you from New Jersey?
Well, I feel like I have to give a shout out to Professor Sesno. I'm in a sustainability reporting class. It's actually a really great course, highly recommend. I'm a recent transfer student to GW, but I am a DMV local.
Transfer from where?
I'm from the upstate New York region. I went to Colgate University,
Yeah.
shout out. Anyway, I am an English major. I notice a lot of people here are not English majors. They're more on the policy or journalism side. So I wanted to ask, as someone who feels like an outsider, what we can do in the everyday, kind of what is our civic responsibility kind of looking like in kind of a mundane way for the average citizen. I don't think I want to go down the path of public policy, but I also do not want to be incognizant of what we can do for our communities.
I mean, I was at an AI conference today quoting James Baldwin. I think artists have been the people who have been inspiring this country towards its higher ideals, challenging this country, exposing this country. So I would say be an English major, be an artist, be a creator, inspire people. That is so needed. I remember my presidential campaign, I leaned on the poetry of Langston Hughes. Oh, let America be America again, the land that never has been yet, but yet must be the land where everyone is free, the poor man, the Indian, the Negro, me. Who made America? Whose sweat and blood, whose faith and pain, whose hand at the foundry, whose plow in the rain, must make our mighty dream live again. Oh yes, I say it plain, America never was America to me, but I swear this oath, America will be. I mean, that is, we are here because of artists, and we should value that. And that's why, as a senator, I want to support the NEA, the arts, art education in our schools, and I'm glad that you're boldly, unapologetically an English major.
Bravo, bravo.
All right.
Navriti, you get the last word.
You're making Jacob nervous over here. He wants to keep his internship.
Hi, my name's Niv. I'm actually from Middlesex County, New Jersey.
What?
But I'm standing here today because of someone else from Middlesex County, New Jersey, my amazing roommate, Diksha Chavan.
You're Middlesex County, New Jersey too? Oh my gosh.
How many in the room are from New Jersey?
What? Yes, go Jersey girls and boys. Okay.
Okay, I'm a pain in the ass roommate. Me and Diksha talk politics all the time, and I say some really controversial stuff, like I would get canceled on the internet in 5 seconds type stuff. But she doesn't let that interfere in the way of how she shows her love for me. She cares for me. She's the best roommate ever. My question to you is, we're able to stay roommates and have this wonderful friendship because we love each other despite our political differences, but we're roommates. How do we love each other and love strangers in this country?
Wow, that's a great question to end on. I want to ask everybody here to be intentional in your creation of community. I mean, that's what we need, people, is people who create community. And not just creating it on the basis of similarities, but on the basis of connection. We are suffering a crisis of loneliness in this country, a crisis of, men, we've the least amount of friends we've ever had. And I actually think that this is a source of a lot of our mental health crises that we're having today, the rise in suicide and deaths of despair. I think one of the greatest crises, our Surgeon General is saying one of our greatest crises right now is a lack of community. And so I've decided in my own personal life to be intentional in trying to create communities. I've created book clubs, and I've created a well-being group, and more than that. So I just want you to be thoughtful about that. And then I really hope that you can do something that takes you way out of your comfort zone into a group really different than you. And I will give you one example of this. When I went to Oxford, England, to study, I was pretty psyched about this. I really hadn't been out of the country. I don't even know if I had a passport before I went. And in the first few weeks I was there, I met a woman who asked me out. Now that didn't happen at Stanford. No women were asking me out. And I was pretty psyched. I was like, God bless the Queen.
Was it the Queen who was asking? I mean, that would be a story.
And so at the last minute, though, I get a note from her changing the place we were going to meet. And the note says, meet me at the Oxford L Chain Society. And I'm like, L Chain Society? What is the Oxford L Chain Society? And I go around asking people, where's the L Chain Society? And somebody says, Cory, it's pronounced L'chaim. And I'm like, is something wrong with your throat? They're like, no, it's L'chaim. And I'm like, okay. And so I stumble through the alleys, and I go up, and I hear all this noise coming from a door. And I knock, and nobody answers, and then I just sort of open the door, and I see a scene. The only cultural illusion I have, we're more the same age, so you'll know this, because my mom had took me to see a movie called Yentl. And these are people like with black hats and beards, and they had bad tailors because strings were hanging out of their pocket. And only the Jews are laughing at this right now. The Jews are like, this is a great story. Everybody else is like, what's this guy talking about? Anyway, and so it was like one of those moments, at least this is how I remember it, where like the record stops, and everybody stops and looks at me. And it's one of those moments that I had the ability to read everyone's mind. I said, these people are thinking, what is this large black man doing here? Which was funny because it was exactly what I was thinking. I'm thinking to myself, what is this large black man doing here? And so I am so uncomfortable, but this very orthodox-looking woman comes over to me and goes, "Are you Cory Booker?" And I didn't want to be Cory Booker at that point. I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Are you supposed to meet, so-and-so?" And I said, "Yes." And they go, "Well, she couldn't make it." And I'm like, this is just like America. I'm stood up. And so then I turned to leave, and she asked me a question that changed my life. She said, "Would you stay and have dinner with us?" And I'm this liberal guy, but I sincerely wanted to get the hell out of that room. But I couldn't say, I double book my Friday nights on dates. She knew I had nothing to do. And so she sits me down in her seat. She was a rabbi's wife. And I'm sitting next to the rabbi. And we start talking. And before I know it, I'm like, oh my God, I have so much in common. We were actually talking about homosexuality. And because I was sort of judgmental of very overtly religious people and thinking that they are not kind to brothers and sisters that are gay. And he says, I have a gay brother, and then he starts telling me about Torah. But by the end of the night, it's a Jewish holiday that's coming up. This will be my 30th anniversary of celebrating this holiday, Simchas Torah. And so by the end of the night, it's the celebration, the completion of the Torah. I'm dancing around with the Torah. Until he tells me jokingly, he goes, look, if you drop that, I'm going to have to fast for a month. And I'm like, I never fumbled at Stanford, but please take this from me. I leave, and I hang out with my friends, American friends, blacks and Jews, one guy who was biracial. And when I tell them I was at this place, they go, Cory, that's a Chabad house. And these are crazy, wacko, right-wing Jews. And they made me almost feel bad for it, but something about that connection made me do something that's really out of character. I would have watched it for a great experience. I don't care what these say. But I thought to myself, I'm going to go back and ask that rabbi about all these things they said he believes. And so I go back and speak to him. And it ended up being a 2-hour conversation talking about the Arab-Israeli situation, Palestinians. And the crazy thing was we didn't agree on everything. But I looked at him and I told him about this story about Alex Haley and Malcolm X, that they were on a commuter train in the 1960s. And Alex Haley was writing that it was stiff. This was when Malcolm X is like saying white people are devils, and everybody's sort of watching, all these very formal business people. But one business guy gets up and walks over to Malcolm X and goes, Mr. X, sir, I don't agree with everything you say, but I respect you and I like your style. And then Alex Haley says, Malcolm X stood up and got really close to the guy. Everybody's holding their breath. And he stuck out his hand and he goes, you can search the world 2 times over and you'll never find 2 people who agree on everything. And I look at the rabbi and I said, I have to confess, I grew up in an area with some Jewish families, with a lot of Jewish families, but I really don't know about your faith. And I said, let's make a deal. Let's exchange a book. A book. You give me something you would want somebody who doesn't know about Judaism to read, and I'll give you something from my culture, because I really don't think you know about Black Americans. And we agreed. And if we finished the book, we could do another exchange. I gave him Malcolm X's autobiography. I'm a Rhodes Scholar in Oxford, and I never read anything by this author. Some of you might find this embarrassing for me, but he gave me Night by Elie Wiesel.
You had never read that?
Never read it. And so we start exchanging books. I'm devouring what he's giving me, and he's devouring what I'm giving him. And as I'm learning more and more, I realize what one of my Christian mentors said at Stanford is that you can't really understand the historical context of Jesus if you don't know more about Judaism. And so I asked him, you're giving me books, but can I start studying the Torah with you? And next thing you know, I'm studying the Torah, but I'm coming back every Friday night for Shabbat, because I'm like, this is kind of a cool thing, this Shabbat. And I start bringing Jewish friends of mine that never even lit a Shabbat candle, Muslim friends of mine, Mormon friends of mine. It becomes the greatest place on Friday night to hang out in Oxford. By the end of the first year, he does something that completely left me unexpected. A year now, I'm studying Torah, we're exchanging books, we're having these amazing Friday night conversations. He says, Cory, Judaism is not about conversion. So one of the 3 Abrahamic faiths doesn't care what faith you belong to, but it's about goodness and decency. The Torah is a conversation about goodness and decency. You represent these values. I want you to be the president of this Chabad. I want you to be the president of the Oxford L'chaim Society. And I look at him and I go, dude, I knew you were crazy, but now I see you're Meshuggah too. and so we argue about it, and I agree to be the president if there's a co-president with me that's Jewish, and it makes national news. I'm a 23-year-old dude, and I'm like in full page of me in the London Times magazine, and me and the rabbi, and then we take off. we started inviting speakers from Leonard Nimoy to Gorbachev, and in the 90s, that was a big get.
Yeah.
And we become the second biggest student group in all of Oxford, next to the Oxford Union, and we start doing speeches with them of inviting famous speakers. So I, amazingly, leave Oxford, and I miss it. I'm in law school, and I'm like, I'm this black Christian that misses this community. And so I decided, you know what, at Yale, I'm going to start a Shabbat dinner group.
Yeah, how'd that go over?
There are now thousands of members of what we started when it was just 5 of us around a Shabbat table.
That didn't exist at Yale before?
Didn't exist at Yale before.
And you started it with others?
With others.
Yeah.
With another rabbi named Shmuley, which is a Chinese blessing. May you live to know 2 Shmuleys. I tell you this story is because tomorrow morning, I have my Torah study every Friday with one of my close friends.
And you go to Bible study with a bunch of conservatives as well, don't you?
I guess what I'm saying is I found community. My life has been enriched by it.
I guess what you're saying, and this is something that I hope you take, and we should take, because what characterizes almost all the stories that you have told us today and talked about is your willingness, your ability, sometimes your courage, to go in places that are completely unfamiliar or where you would not normally be expected and sometimes welcomed. To ask questions of other people who you don't understand or who your implicit bias might suggest I shouldn't even be talking to. To hang around and listen closely enough so that you can learn from them and they can learn from you. And if we can do that and more, that will make a difference. I want to quote you, back to you, what you said here, and we're wrapping here because we've got to let people get on with their lives, but we could go all night long with you, I think.
I'm going to let you say the last word. I just want to say something to that point. My journey, and this is in seriousness, it's a journey that I think we're all making. It's a journey of humanity. But my personal journey has been this journey of trying to shift from being us versus them to just us. It really is just us. And when I encounter people that spew hate at me, I really think some of you should think about sending me a Mother's Day card, because sometimes I'm out in public and people look at me and go, "You mother." But I try to return to my basic understanding is that I am connected to you and that we share a humanity and that we need each other. And even though we can't talk, this might be on a reaction, I'm not going to divorce you in my mind from understanding that we share a common community. And yes, the best rewards I've had in my life have been the times I've stepped out of my comfort zone to embrace people that are different. And some of the most flattering things to me in the United States Senate, as the only black person in my caucus when I came here, were the people, not just senators, but people in this Senate family who have stepped out to try to get to know me better, to learn more about me, even though I might vote different than them, think different than them, be from a different place, different race, or what have you.
In our focus group, Frank Luntz asked our students, and you remember this, what gives you hope? And Mariana said, our generation is what gives me hope. We've shown that we are willing to show up, and we're also done with complacency. And Eduardo said, we may disagree on political issues, but at least we understand the fragility, and we are willing to have tough conversations. That's what you should do when you come to this place. And you do here in Washington. You choose this place for this reason. And that's what we need much more of. And that's what you've been saying tonight. You said these words in your commencement speech at GW in 2017.
It was a dangerous commencement speech.
You said, we cannot eliminate darkness. You cannot banish it by cursing darkness. The only way to get rid of darkness is light, and to be the light yourself. The power that each of us has. And it's hard. It's really hard. And it's hard not to get distressed by it. Before I thank you, I want to offer a few thanks. I want to thank our focus group. Could you guys stand up for those of you who are in the room? You were honest and you were sincere. I want to thank Frank Luntz, who couldn't be with us tonight because he's teaching someplace else. I want to thank Sarah Morissette and the SMPA staff and Ben Sorensen, who helped put this together, edited the videos. I want to thank Brendan Smith, Tracy Sullivan, Jen Hillary, who helped organize this event this evening. Alex Ashley, where is Alex? Would you stand? Alex is working on this project now, is going to assistant producer. He's a student here, and he's part of this wonderful gift to learn and do. I want to thank Peter Loge and Dean Paul Walbeck. Paul Walbeck talks about the engaged liberal arts, and I think we did that here tonight. So thank you very much. I want to thank Matt Cannella. Where is Matt Cannella? Matt Cannella is over here. Matt worked behind my back when he was here at GW with Ted and conspired and provided the funding for this series, which is inaugurated here tonight, and I hope that we can do something like this periodically and bring people together. I want to thank all of you for being here and for being who you are and doing what you do and being the learners that you are, because you, honest to God, you will shape the future. You will do what he has done and more, and that's amazing. And of course, I want to thank Ted and Meredith, because none of this would have been possible without you. President Granberg, you opened this up. Could I have a mic down here for the president? You opened this up, and I'm going to let you, I'm throwing a curveball here as we get out. I'm going to let you have a final word. You've listened to your students and others. You've listened to our distinguished guest, and I would love to let you have the final word as we go on our way.
And I'm just a senator. She's the president.
She's the president. That's right.
I'm not sure you're doing me a favor asking me to follow the two of you, but I was. As I was listening to the conversation, I was reflecting on Meacham's work, on work I've done. But at the end, what I realized I was feeling was this sense of hope and excitement and possibility. Because the people gathered here, and especially the students, especially the focus group. I mean, you guys were just amazing. I feel the energy and the commitment in this room to move this work forward. And at a place like GW, nowhere else do we have the kind of opportunity that we have here to make motion toward a better future. And so I thank you both so much for your incredibly generous gift that made this night possible and that will make many more of these nights possible. And I thank the two of you for a moving, hilarious, riveting, and deeply touching conversation. Thank you. So thank
you. Would you all join me in thanking Senator Cory Booker for being so generous with his time and so honest with your views and so candid in what you do. Thank you all. Have a great evening.